Okay, I'm just going for it. This is the first video that I'm going to talk on this channel, and it's about a subject that I hope to kind of embody. This channel is essentially an experiment to try out a philosophy that I already kind of have seen started to happen in the creative community in the last decade. A lot of people are starting to catch on, but I just wanted to share my thoughts about this stuff because I think it's really interesting. Having to do with any creative output, music, art, any kind of media production. Things have changed radically. Obviously, everyone knows that with the internet, starting with Napster, all kinds of stuff. And many people are struggling. They're bummed out. They think it's over, but really it's just the face of the game has completely changed, and I have some ideas I'd like to share about that. So it starts back in the 20th century, where, as far as, let's just talk specifically about music, the means of production were very expensive. Most people could not afford the means to record. Um, the equipment was relatively new, and it was hard to get, and it was expensive. So you basically needed financing to make an artistic object musically. And that's where the record labels came in. And that structure served as basically, it had an effective curation. It chose what was presented um, to the mass public. And this had a desirable effect and also an undesirable effect. The desirable effect was that it consistently produced higher level stuff. Not all the time across the board, but it that is going to make the quality of the work more developed on an average basis. It basically filters out the people that aren't quite there yet. Um, and another effect this had was basically you're limiting supply from an economic perspective. So, what you needed physical distribution. We didn't have the internet. You had the radio, but really you needed physical distribution and manufacturing of products. And like we said, the means of production was also very expensive. So this limits supply, and that's why in the 20th century, if we talk specifically about music, you would see artists have massive success, massive wealth, um, worldwide acclaim, and that's kind of imprinted on our minds. But we need to remember that was just a tiny segment in time. Before that, as far as being a musician in the world, it was completely different. The structure, the way it worked, was completely different. It's only in the 20th century that you had the Led Zeppelins and the Beatles and these bands that had massive success, massive wealth. Um, that only happened because of that specific structure, the way it worked, the limited supply, the physical distribution. So fast forward to the development of the internet, and specifically when file sharing, when basically bandwidth became high performance enough to share files and download large files. And then you have the advent of YouTube, and I just wanted to comment because a lot of people are talking about this lately, and a lot of people are getting it and the way to do it. But there's some specific tweaks that I want to talk about. Basically, again, from the economic perspective, what you've done is taken supply and have it approach infinity. So, because now the means of production are in the hands of everyone. You know, the difference between the 1960s or the 1950s and now is that, you know, YouTube is your radio or it's your MTV. Everyone has their own MTV. Let's say Instagram is your own Rolling Stone feature article. Everyone has their own Rolling Stone in the form of Instagram. Everybody has the means of production. Everybody can make a record on their laptop. Everyone can make world-class art on their iPhone. So everyone has the means of production now, and that's caused supply to approach infinity. And when supply approaches infinity, the price of a commodity approaches zero. And I think that's a lot of things that modern day creative people, it might be helpful to accept that from an economic perspective, what it, in a way, anything you create, you need to accept that it's valueless. It's it isn't worth anything because there's a million other things, not exactly like it, but providing the same function. It's like rice or corn. It's a commodity. And that doesn't, a lot of people stop there and think, oh man, it's over. That's such a bummer. There's no reason to do it. And that gets into another subject, which I will probably make additional videos about, that have to do with the reason for doing art, your reasons. And just as a foreshadowing, I mean, a lot of people I've found through experience, just being adjacent to a lot of people in the creative industries, they do it for reasons other than doing it. They do it for, you know, ego-based reasons, you know, wealth, fame, attention, attention from the opposite sex, opportunities, you know, traveling, whatever, all these things that have very little to do with the actual act of creating stuff. And so for people who are in it for that reason, yeah, it's a huge bummer. But I think that's also going to be a filtering effect, because the strategy is to realize that you do have the means of production. Everybody does. You have your own MTV. Like I could be talking, this is my MTV right now. I'm giving an interview. And then Instagram is your Rolling Stone, and your website is your record company, et cetera, et cetera. And the approach is whereas in the old model, where that was curated and supply was limited and you had to be chosen by the financiers, a strategy a lot of people employed is to look at what other people, how did other people do it? What, you know, oh, this guy, he wrote a, you know, a country song about military veterans and it hit. So what I'll do is I'll kind of do that, but make it slightly different. And since that got through the gates, then I will too. So that had a homogenizing factor, an assimilating factor. It made a lot of output, artistic output, be similar and sound the same and look the same. Basically, people copied each other. Like, oh, we need to sound like the Beatles. They were successful, so if we just sound like that. Now it's completely opposite. That's the last thing you want to do. The more strange you can be, the more unique, novel you can be, the better. And that's, I think, is a beautiful thing. And this, it has an Aquarian vibe. Pluto's about to ingress Aquarius, and that has, you know, that's neither here nor there, but that's how I conceptualize the Aquarian age, is exactly that, the means of production in everybody's hands. And there's a very strong assimilating factor, and that is, you know, the fact that everyone is a creative person now, everyone. And to realize that it is almost valueless, just like That's the wrong way to term it. You need to think of it more like breathing or talking. You know, it's just a human behavior, but there's nothing special about it. It's only in the 20th century that we put artists on a pedestal because of that limiting supply factor, that only that particular channel you could go through to have your work physically distributed. Now everyone can distribute their work in milliseconds. Um, and so rather than homogenizing, you, the key is going to be exactly yourself. The more yourself you can be, the more you're going to stand out, but also the more it does provide something of value because it's a unique form. Um, or the way to think about it is this, is that it's not really the content. Here's another subject that is under this heading, that also in that, mid 20th century period where you have this limited supply and thus you had lots of wealth um, to produce these works, you had works that the complexity was increasing, and you get your Dark Side of the Moons, and you get these masterworks that took years or months, many months to create, and you could spend a lot of time and spend a lot of money and get everything just right and perfect, and spend a lot of time in development and really plan out an intricate cathedral of a work. And again, now that's completely opposite, because if you spend 6 years making an artwork or making a record and you drop it, yeah, you may get a buzz for the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, but by then everyone's forgotten about it. They've moved on to something else because everything is moving so fast. And so it doesn't make economic sense to spend a lot of time and spend a lot of money producing work. And like in the music realm, the gear that this stuff is produced on, it's so expensive, and there's a law of diminishing returns. You can spend $4,000 for a preamp that gives you marginal improvement. That doesn't make sense now. It makes sense to produce art as cheaply as possible, as quickly as possible, so you can produce more of it and move on to the next thing. The world's just different now. It doesn't make sense to spend 5 years making a record if people are only going to be interested in it for a month. Having to do the supply is limited thing. Back in the day when things needed to be physically distribution, it had a longer life cycle. And now it doesn't. So to me, that's a freeing realization, is that you can flow more. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to make these intricate cathedral-like works unless you want to, but you shouldn't expect that's going to change the world. Instead, allow yourself to be more free in expression. So that points to an idea that now it's not so much the content that matters. It's not how perfect the performance is, or how clever the ideas are, or how well mixed the record is, or how well painted the lines of the painting are. Because again, side note, AI is going quickly being able to do all this stuff. That's another reason why, instead of seeking to homogenize, or assimilate, or copy what's been successful before, to be as yourself as you possibly can, no matter how strange it is or no matter how imperfect it is, because that's going to separate you from what AI is making. The more imperfect, the more human, the more relatable, the more unique and novel. It's really about novelty. Um, but the content doesn't matter as much. Um, like I used to think of it as it's become quantity over quality, but I've refined that to think of it like this, like as far as being artistic, a creative person in whatever field, it's not so much about perfecting your content or coming up with the latest, greatest, most clever idea or way of doing those things are still interesting. But what's more important is the act of choosing. It's the container rather than what's in the container. The act of saying, all right, this is a video, whatever it is, how messed up or imperfect or weird it is, I'm saying this is the video. And it's that act of choosing that now is what is going to be the defining factor, I think, in what art is and what makes it successful. Um, it's so think about that. It's the choosing. It's not so much what is being chosen. It could be, it doesn't matter what it is. It's the act of that you're saying that's what it is. And a lot of people have experimented with that before, even back in the 40s and 50s. But a final thing I want to talk about, and I'll probably make additional videos about each subsection in this video. But again, with that, I see so many people that get so disappointed when they try to live an artistic life. And I'm not talking about specifically about surviving financially doing it. That's a whole nother can of worms. Uh, you know, when I say success as an artist, it doesn't mean making enough money to survive. That's a whole nother thing. I'm talking about continuing to live that way and being prolific and feeling like you're expressing yourself and feeling like you're producing stuff. Um, you know, but to look at, have expectations of what happened in the 20th century, with a type of entitlement. That's what I wanted to talk about. There's a type of entitlement that a lot of people that I've, encountered, and that I observe when they try to do artistic endeavors, they expect, these perks and these effects that are really becoming vestigial. You're not going to be flying around on a private jet and going to all the parties and all this stuff. That's not what it's about, and it's going to become more and more like that. In other words, what I'm getting at is that it's best to, if you're going to be some type of artist or creative person, my philosophy is you want to detach it from all concerns of money or attention or fame. You should do it if no one's paying attention. It's more of like almost a spiritual type practice or a religion. Because to do it with these expectations of external outcomes, money or whatever it is, attention, more and more people are going to be disappointed because it's just the way it is. Everybody, it's like saying that, well, I deserve special treatment because I talk, when most humans talk. That's the way you need to look at everybody is an artist now. And so if you're going to use these tools and media in a creative way, do it unattached from any expected outcome. Do it just for the joy of doing it. Anyway, I wish I had put these ideas in a more concise level, but I'll probably talk about them a lot more in the future. But anyway, this is the first video, so I just wanted to get it done. Okay.